I wake up to a loud thud at the door, and I look out the window, and the place is just swarmed. FBI, IRS, they're criminal agents with the IRS, postal inspectors, local police, state troopers, swarmed up and down the road, all around, and they're just banging on the door, and my mom rushes down the stairs, opens the door, and they're like, step back, hold the dog. My dad's coming down. They're like, where is he?
Welcome to Rise Above. I'm Kevin Lanning, your host. Today, we're sitting down with Ian Bick. His story is nothing short of a miracle, and he is a true testament to rising above. Let's rise above with Ian. Ian, welcome to Rise Above.
This is the Rise Above set?
This is the Rise Above set.
Wow, you guys have improved.
This is my away stadium.
We're in Florida right now.
And we're in Florida.
Where in Florida are we?
We're in West Palm Beach.
Oh, fancy. Where are we going to dinner?
Have you ever been?
No,
before?
I think I've only been to Miami.
You drove here to West Palm, right?
Oh, I drove. Yeah, this is my first time
Jesus,
here.
20 hours.
I know, and I got to drive right back after this episode.
Well, welcome. Welcome. Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me on yours. I appreciate it.
Yeah, your episode will be out after this one comes out.
Amazing.
I keep, like 15 or 16 in the bank, but...
Smart man.
Yeah, I always stay ahead, prepared.
Wise. I'm not surprised coming from you, Ian.
I've learned, just to not leave things to chance. And, we had like a guest scheduled for tomorrow. He canceled because he lost his ID. So if I was depending on that episode, would have been in hot water.
Wise.
Yeah, I've learned in my years of mistakes.
So you keep 16 in the bank, just in case.
Exactly.
So tell me, Ian, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut. I was born actually in Manhattan. And then my parents moved to my family's summer home and my dad's summer home where he grew up, and then they renovated it before I was born. Grew up in Danbury, Connecticut, did a little stint in private schooling, Montessori school, have a brother who's 4 years younger, and typical normal family vacations, middle class. My dad was a retired New York City public schools teacher and then became a caterer and started his entrepreneurial route. And my mom was a social worker and a massage therapist. And that was the family, We always had dogs and the trips and family game nights and pizza nights on Fridays and just a lot of independence, and Montessori school teaches you independence too. Always kind of like free to do whatever I want and learn as I go and, be out. We grew up in a neighborhood where it was a gated community and you could go out and play and you just come home when it's dark out. And you just kind of do your own thing. The manhunt, paintball, airsoft, dirt biking, very outdoorsy. Even though I was the most unathletic kid you'd ever meet, I was always like the chubby kid. But I would just, I played sports. Like every parent puts their kids through like those sign-up leagues and stuff. I did soccer, I did swimming, did basketball, but it wasn't really my thing. I didn't like doing that. I did play sports in prison though.
What sports did you play in prison?
Basketball, which I'd get lucky, and I was always a kid that I was always a big gambler, so I would like gamble the half-court shots, three-pointers against these big Jack Black guys that have been playing ball their whole life, and I'm sitting here making bets, and I lose, but I'd always get lucky. Like I remember losing, like I'd be $1,000 in the hole to someone, and then I'd be like, I'll bet you another $1,000 if I could hit this half-court shot, and I'd hit it. It's just
usually the story is they don't hit it, and then they double up, and that's the story of a gambler.
Yeah, I mean, there was cases where I'd lost, and I'd always doubled down when I was gambling throughout my life. And then I played softball, which I actually really liked. That was a lot of fun. We would play for hours. It would be an all-day event when there's a softball game, and at the camp, even at the low, it's very structured. You have sports teams, you have prizes, it's super competitive, and it's super well ran. The inmates don't tolerate anyone who kind of like affects the game. People are training, there's practices. It's a very competitive thing, and teams and leagues and whatnot.
What was the relationship with your younger brother growing up?
We were never really that close. We're still not even, where he works for me now, he's my scheduler. He does all my bookings. But we're two very different people. He loves soccer, he loves sports, loves the gym, and I go to the gym, but we don't really like hang out. We'll hang out when we're with cousins. We were with family last week in Rochester. But just two entirely different things. We love each other. I know, like, when I was going through my legal issues and was in prison, he was in high school, and that was when kids would tease him, and there would be stuff on the news or on Twitter or on social media, and he would always shoot back. Like, he was always my biggest defender with that, and biggest supporter. And now it's kind of like the roles have reversed, where now I'm becoming something of myself, and people are like, "Oh, I saw your brother go viral on TikTok," and it's kind of like switched and stuff. And he thinks it's cool with what I'm doing. Like, there'll be a guest where he's like, "Oh, you had that dude on," like we had the guy from War Dogs on, and then just like the people I'm with, like, "Oh, you were just with Mike Tyson," or this and that, and he's fascinated by that because his friends are fascinated by that. So it's a weird but like good relationship.
Were you entrepreneurial when you were younger?
Yeah, 100%. I was always the lemonade stand kid. We tried to build a candy shop across the street from our house by knocking down trees. We were literally sawing up trees to make this candy shop until like the city saw we were cutting down trees and then like put a kibosh to it. I was always like, so every summer there would always be a new system that came out, like the new Xbox, the new PlayStation, the Wii, whatever. Or a new computer I wanted, and I always worked for that. Like, I would start the lemonade stand and save all my money to buy that system. Our parents didn't just buy that for us. We came from a good family, and there was money, but we weren't spoiled brats where it's like, I want the new Xbox, and they bought it for us. It was only on like holidays or birthdays and whatnot. So when you wanted something other than that, you had to work for it. And that's what I did early on, and I worked for my dad early on. I was always a hard worker. I think that was always like the biggest misconception of me throughout the criminal case and everything. And it's how I built what I have now. It's just hard work. And that's what people miss about me. They don't get that from me because they figured everything was just handed. Like, how does a kid own a nightclub? Well, I owned it through hard work and figuring it out along the way and being hands-on.
How did you get into the nightclub scene growing up?
So me and my best friend, it was like a domino effect. We foamed these cars with insulating foam. The vice president and the president of our community made these rules, like no dirt biking, no golf carts, all of this that we felt were targeted towards us. So we foamed the cars. We ended up getting caught. We had the cans of insulating foam in our garage. Cops searched the garage. They called me the black sheep of the community. Got sentenced to community service. The cops did the whole, he confessed to one of us, and then the other person ratted on this person, and it was just, we got caught. Community service we get sentenced to, and me, larger than life, always wanted to be different, couldn't just go to a place to do community service. I decided to create this whole project, which we called Fight for the Homeless, and I sold those Live Strong bracelets and just had them designed to say Fight for the Homeless on them for $1 a piece. And sold them and raised a couple $1,000s for the local homeless shelter. And from there, I decided to take it to the next level and do a school dance to support the cause. And I convinced the principal to let me do a school dance. Everything I learned from my dad's catering and event business, I kind of applied to it. Passed out flyers, did marketing, sold tickets to the dance that had like 300 kids. And I was just hooked on the idea of putting together this event, this party. And what I realized was that early on is that I loved to be, well-liked and popular. That was always like my biggest addiction, was I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be popular. I never wanted people to not like me. And I was always in theater. I did the musicals all 4 years of high school. I was a theater kid, a nerdy kid, and they would always put me in like dressed as a woman as Milton Berle and all of these different people, and people would laugh and I'd be the center of attention. So when I was doing that first dance, I kind of got that feeling of being liked, and that is something like when you get that taste of being on stage like that and in the spotlight and everyone's talking about you, you're looking for your next fix, because after that event, it goes away. So in my mind, the mix of the entrepreneurial background I had and that feeling kind of gave me the idea to say, hey, there could be money here if I sell tickets to get kids to go to events, because kids were tired of going to school dances. They were over that. It was annoying. You couldn't do the grinding and the booty dancing and whatnot, and you couldn't drink and come to it, and it was just a different vibe. So very quickly started throwing house parties, which was like a quick fix of that popularity, where my house parties became like these 300 or 400 people ragers at my parents' lake house. People are on the boats. I'm hooking up with girls. On the patio, we set up a bar. We were charging $5 a solo cup. My parents are upstairs, have no idea we have this whole alcoholic bar on the patio. I had like the upperclassmen that would work for my parents go upstairs to make sure my parents were okay and keep them distracted. And it was just huge ragers. And we were very lucky that nothing ever happened. No one ever got hurt. Everyone always looked after each other, because when you hear in some of these other towns and later on, like people die from car accidents from drinking at a high school party, or if one of the kids fell in the lake, that could have been a disaster. It could have been so many different things. So that was like my first taste into it. And from there, my parents put a kibosh on it after a few, and we moved to renting out a local theater to do these events. And then I eventually stumbled upon this nightclub in Danbury called Tuxedo Junction, where I would rent it out, do the same thing, but charge kids money to come. And kids would come from all over Connecticut and New York. And I'd get like 1,000 to 1,500 kids and make 10 grand a night once a month throwing these raves. And this was in 2011, where electronic music was starting to take off in colleges. And so I just applied that logic of mashing like Latin music with hip hop and electronic music and getting DJs that could perform that. No big names. And we called it like the Christmas rave, the Halloween rave. We did a paint party, and it was a business at this point. I got an LLC, and I started wearing a suit and tie to school. I carried around a briefcase, and that was my life. At that point, I figured I wasn't going to college. This is like sophomore, junior year. I'm making money. I went and toured Johnson Wales in Miami to see if I wanted to go into hospitality. And I went on the whole tour for the weekend, and they brought us to the Fontainebleau. And they said, this is where you could get an internship after you graduate from our college. And the intern was polishing silverware there for $12 an hour after a college degree, which the first 2 years you're not even doing anything hands-on. And so at that point, I already had a corporate job at 16 at the local banquet center where I threw that dance at, where the CEO hired me to help book proms and set events up and whatnot. So I was like, I'm already doing this now and making more money. Why would I go to college? So set college aside and jumped right into business.
That's fascinating. It's interesting to hear, leading up to it with the wristbands and a few other ventures that you had, the kibosh was put on some of those, and then you found another way to either refine it or just take another route, like that entrepreneurial foundation that it sounds like your father passed down to you, and you watched him do it with his catering company.
Yeah. I wish I got better. What I realized about my dad is he's like an extremely hard worker. Maybe not the best business person, which is where I probably didn't learn that from, but extremely hard. And he came, like in the catering, it's not necessarily business making deals. It's pretty cut and dry. You're offering a service for a fixed price. Whereas the business I was trying to get in is a whole different realm of taking investments and loans and structuring deals where it's not people paying for a service. So I never got that experience, which didn't help me, of course, later on. But I've always had this mentality of like, I'll figure out a way. I've always figured out a way. You can never count me out. And I think that's what's gotten me so far in this business now. It's because I'll always figure out a way. And now something I lacked before was I never thought about consequences, and I never thought of what would happen if this didn't work out. Like if a concert, I was always thinking, okay, the concert's going to lose money. The concert's going to make money. It's going to sell all the tickets. The glass will always be full no matter what, even if you take a sip out of it. So now with my businesses, I look at it as, okay, what if I lose this client? What if this happens? How do I pay for this? So I'm always thinking of a plan B, where I never thought of a plan B before. Because in my mind, I was trained you always have to just have a plan A. But as you get older and you start to realize it's okay to have a plan B as long as you're still focused on your plan A, and the plan B is just a fallback as like a safety net.
So tell us how you learned about coming up with a plan B and not always relying on plan A.
By losing everything at such a, when you look at my story, it's crazy when you think about the whole thing. I mean, by the time I was 18 years old, I owned my second nightclub. I had 2 nightclubs by that point. And like with my whole court case, it's so confusing with like the dynamics because everyone thought it had to do with the nightclub, but it really didn't. It had to do with these concerts that I raised. I raised about $500,000 from friends and family to do concerts at colleges and in different clubs in different markets in Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Connecticut. And the problem is like you put all that money into concerts that may or may not make money, very high risk business, and you're doing it as a promoter. If you lose, you have nothing to have to like you have no brand. Whereas like if you owned a venue yourself, if you owned it, if you lost some money, you would at least have some credibility in a brand. So I lost everything by the time I'm 18 on these concerts with big acts like Tyga, Big Sean, Chief Keef, big names, lost everything and had nothing to show for it. So when I went on to my act 2, which was to get the idea to go back to my roots and reopen the club that I used to promote at that had closed, I was in so much debt, I could never get ahead. I would take good money I'd make on a show and pay off old, bad money, old investors. I could never pay my bills. I used to put piles of wood in front of the meter, the electric meter, so the electric company wouldn't shut off my power. I had a $30,000 bill one time. I would go months, like I owed the chain smokers $30,000 at one point. I was pawning off my car and refrigerators and shit in the club just to pay it back. I would send fake wire receipts just to delay time. So it was just one giant mess. And what ends up happening is during the time of running the club, I'm investigated by the FBI and the IRS for those previous concerts. And they had accused me of running a Ponzi scheme, which was never my intention. It just, looking back on it, happened to be a Ponzi scheme because I would take a loan from you to pay off another loan because in the concert business, there's no cash flow. You're taking a big investment for a payoff that might happen 6 months from now or a year from now on this concert. But I was promising returns way sooner than that. So I wasn't selling merchandise or a service or anything like that. So I had no cash flow. So I was using investor, lender money, whatever, because I didn't have any credit. I was using that as like a bridge loan to pay off other investors and loans just until the concerts happened. And this would have worked out perfectly had the concerts sold out and made money, but they didn't. So that was the epic failure, and that started the investigation when everyone complained. And we did stupid things with the business money, like buy jet skis and take trips and go out to dinner because we were just thinking we needed to take a salary. We were 18 years old, me and my business partner with way too much money. I didn't do any accounting until, a year or two down the road. There was no receipts. There was nothing. It was a giant mess.
What is this doing to your mental health during this time? Paying, taking investments here, paying, this company that you owe money to, that kind of lifestyle. What is it doing to your mental health?
Physically, I was put, my heaviest, when I went to prison, I was like 290 pounds. Very chubby. I would always eat like fast food. It's emotionally draining. Like I couldn't keep a relationship because I was so stressed. I gave up some great women because I was so focused on the business because I had to put everything into it. And it's just like you're taking, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire, but you think the gasoline's water. That would be the best example. And you're dumping this water to put it on, but it's really gasoline. And it just keeps making the fire bigger and bigger, and you're burning everything that's around you. There's no life. So it sucks everything out of you. And then when I started borrowing money from even shadier figures like bikers and drug dealers, that's what really put my personal life at risk too. So when you have the heat of that, and then the heat of law enforcement, and then the heat of letting your friends and families down from someone that always wanted to be liked, and everyone's starting to talk bad about you and spread all of these, rumors about you because they make it seem like, I scammed them, which was never my intention. It was a pitfall. It was humiliating, and it was exhausting, and it was demoralizing, and it was just, I was in a very depressed state for a long time. And I remember when I went to prison, that was when I first got some relief because I needed to be physically removed from that situation. Yep. And when I finally got removed from all of that stress, that's what I think going to prison was the best thing that could ever happen to me, because if it wasn't for prison, I probably still would have been running the club, because that's how my mind works. Like, I'm going to find a way no matter what. So I never would have walked away from it had I wasn't physically removed from that situation.
So what was the arrest like? Did they just come to your house and, SWAT team? What did that look like? And then the process of, being, indicted and arraignment, et cetera.
So we knew that me and my attorney knew that the feds were investigating anyone that gets arrested by the federal government. It's not a surprise. You get served a target letter, for months and months, and you kind of see that with high profile figures when they're doing raids and whatnot. In advance before anyone gets arrested. So we were well aware. We had meetings with them, and my lawyer said, hey, you're going to be indicted. We're just waiting, but you'll be able to turn yourself in. Well, because I was running the club and I was kind of in their face and I wasn't willing to make a deal because they were offering me prison time right off the bat and whatnot, they decided to raid my house at 5 a.m, my parents' house, 5 or 6 a.m. I just got back from the casino. It was a January, cold, snowy day. Got back from the casino at like 4 a.m., lost everything again because I would play Baccarat in Yonkers Raceway, because I wasn't 21. I couldn't go to the Connecticut casino. And I would sit there and I would gamble. And most of the time I won, I would say 90% of it, but there were times I lost. And I would turn 500 into say 20 or 30 grand sometimes, which would always save me from almost getting blacklisted from an artist agent or a drug dealer beating the shit out of me. Like, I used it as a resource, and as an addict, you kind of go to what works for you. So that morning I get home and I go to bed, and I wake up to a loud thud at the door, and I look out the window and the place is just swarmed. FBI, IRS, they're criminal agents with the IRS, postal inspectors, local police, state troopers, swarmed up and down the road, all around, and they're just banging on the door, and my mom rushes down the stairs, opens the door, and they're like, step back, hold the dog. My dad's coming down. They're like, where is he? And at this point, I had been arrested a couple times by local police for liquor violations and criminal mischief charge. So I'm thinking, okay, this is another, what now? This is another local case, because my attorney said the Fed case was still pending and we'll turn ourselves in. And then they were like, do you know what you're being arrested for? I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know what this is about. And then I recognized the case agent, who was one of the head FBI officials on my case. And in that moment, they said to me, what's the passcode to your phone? And dumb Ian, under pressure, gave them the passcode to my phone, which at the time they were going through the legal battles with Apple, where Apple wasn't giving up passwords or whatnot. So I don't think they would have even have been able to get into it, or whatever the situation was.
Can't subpoena it, no.
They can't at all, even during a criminal investigation.
Unless there is a life taken, usually.
Okay. Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah, so I gave them the password. They got in, and all those photos came back to haunt me in trial. Like, every time I got a tattoo or took a trip, it just put all the dates together, And so I gave them that. They hauled me out of the house. They made me wear these ugly cowboy boots because I didn't have shoes without laces, and I was in Annie Get Your Gun in high school. So they had me put those on that were in my closet, and they dragged me out of the house, and they put me on the curb because it was like a scene from the movie. They wanted to wait for the initial Danbury Police Department detective to come just to say, we got you. Finally, do you remember me? And so we're in the car, and I'm with 2 postal inspectors. One's armed next to me in the back seat. The other one's driving, and it was like a 3-hour ride because it was snowing. What only should have been a 45-minute ride to the courthouse. We go to the courthouse. I get arraigned, and I get out in a few hours because it was a $250,000 bond, but in the feds, all you need is a signature. So I got out on bond after getting arraigned. They banned me from social media, which, looking at all the stuff that's going on in the news now and stuff, if I appealed that condition, I probably would have won, because that was a violation of my amendments, because I was literally banned on social media during the case because the prosecutors were like, he'll use social media to talk to victims. But what they were really trying to do was just hamper my ability to run the club, because the club needed social media. All throughout the case, all throughout the trial, I was still actively running the club. I would be on trial, And I got arraigned on 15 federal charges: money laundering, making a false statement, and wire fraud. And I would go to trial. My trial was almost a month long. This was like 11 months later after arraignment. And I would go to trial, a full day of trial, and then I'd race back to put on a show with one of the biggest DJs in the world. It was just such a crazy thing.
During the lead up before, your house was raided, with everything that was going on, making money at the casino, paying off vendors, artists, who knew about what was really going on in your circle? Like, did your partner know, your business partner who was running the club with you? Did your family know? Or was that a secret that you were holding in?
No one really knew. 2 months before the investigation started, I told my family's attorney, who then I told my dad about afterwards. But I kept it so under wraps because I always felt like I needed to be in charge of everything. I didn't want anyone else involved. And it wasn't because I felt I was doing something illegal. It's just I got myself into it. It was my job to get myself out. And I wanted, with failure, I wanted to own the failures just as much as I own the successes. So in a sense, I was just trying to put everything on me so I could keep it going and just pay everyone back. That was always my intentions. And what I realized looking back on it is that every time I tried to do something right in an effort to pay someone back, it just got me into deeper trouble by borrowing from someone else or making one bad decision or anything. It was just always gotten me into a deeper and deeper hole. And my biggest problem was always not being honest when it came to money. I didn't want to let my friends down by saying, hey, I lost your money. And had I done that from the get-go, me and you wouldn't be sitting here today because it never would have been a criminal case. It all had to do with those initial lies. All I had to do was the very first time I lost everyone's money, which was not that much money. It was like 70 grand, 60 grand. I could have just said, I lost your money, I'm sorry, and either A, I'll figure out a way to pay it back, or B, didn't pay it back, and it would have just been a civil thing if anyone even wanted to go after it, but the contracts weren't even valid because we were 17 years old or 16 years old. So I had that chance, and had I done that, this wouldn't be a thing right now.
Where do you think that pride comes from?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think now that I'm older, probably my dad, because my dad's very hard-headed, prideful like that. He's not going to accept defeat. And also, I was very much influenced by these big creators like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and all these individuals who have at that time were the only ones in the world that have very publicly put out that you need failure to succeed and you need to drop out of college and you need to do all these things. And I was idolizing those people. I was a kid that would always post quotes on my Instagram that my friends would make fun of me for, the inspirational quotes. Because you see on social media nowadays, everyone's talking about the success. Like these influencer models, you don't see their bad days. You see the highlights of their life. And that's very deceiving in a lot of ways, which is why I think my show is so important and your show is so important because you're showcasing the person's most vulnerable, failing moments before they became successful. And that's what social media doesn't depict.
I agree. And it's almost creating this illusion that can't be achieved. For your average human, for them to, it's creating a lot of chaos in terms of mental health. And, this person, I had to take hiatuses probably 10 different times from social media because, again, you see all the good that people have going on in their life. You don't see the struggle. You don't see what's really going on behind the curtains. And you compare yourself. I've done that many times in my life, and it slips you into a depression.
Yeah.
And that depression manifests and grows. Let me ask you, so you talked about the attention, the bright lights, that is a drug within itself, being the man. You also talked about being overweight as a child. Do you think there is a correlation between the two? And, at a younger age, were there issues with you being overweight with friends, with acceptance? Was that an issue for you when you were younger?
Yeah, I mean, I was always bullied. I was definitely bullied a lot. And so your bullying correlates to wanting to be liked as you get older, when you're picked on and whatever at a young age. And then the bullying correlates into, again, wanting to be liked and be out there and be likable. And so I think that in my mind, when I started getting attention, I just wanted people to always like me. I was just this happy kid, that I wanted. I mean, like, even as I got older in recent years, like I think it wasn't until recently, and this ties into the social media thing, because I would look, I would read the negative comments and I'm like, this person doesn't even know me. I want them to like me. It threw me through the mud when my name was put out there in the news and all those people I was close with that came to birthday parties and house parties and I took out to dinner when I got arrested, would reshare my arrest and say something negative like I knew all along. No, you fucking didn't. You didn't know shit. You idolized me, or we were friends or whatever, and you talked well about me until this happened. That's like what these allegations, when someone's accused of wrongdoing or anything comes out, everyone automatically flips on and says, whatever. And then, so I always was very upset by that. And I think that always bothered me the most. And it wasn't until recently, like in my world, when you start to hang out with influencers and people that are famous and stuff, you start to realize that they're just like you in a way, that they're human beings too. So now I barely look at people's stories. And if I do look at someone's story, I'm not affected by it anymore. Whereas young Ian or, even a year ago would say, oh, wow, that's cool. I'm jealous of them. Or like you look at an ex-girlfriend or whatever, and you have that feeling of jealousy or wanting to be like them. Now I don't get that at all because I know I'm living my life and I'm doing cool stuff. And, a lot of the times people are posting, like I look at how I used to post on my story and on social media even a year or two ago. And it was some cringy stuff, but that was all just to want to presenting myself in a way of being liked or wanting to be out there to make it look like I'm doing cool. And the people that are actually cool don't need to post that stuff. They don't need to present themselves as an image. They don't need to do all of that stuff because you're looking for that feeling or whatever. So when you realize that you're actually comfortable with yourself and you're happy with where you're at and everyone's a work in progress, it gets better and that feeling kind of goes away. Now when I see a negative comment, I'm okay with it. I laugh at it. And you need those negative comments in this business too. And then just on social media, like I don't overly post my life. I use social media now as a business. I wish I could take a break from social media, but I can't because I need that. But it's just finding that balance, and it all correlates back to that being bullied as a child and wanting to feel liked and wanted. And I think that caused a lot of my problems growing up.
One of the things that you just said that I really liked is you are able to look at those stories and not look too deep into them, not verbatim, but basically. So it's funny, a lot of people do surface level work and try to avoid triggers, things that will trigger them, instead of really getting to the root and right-sizing themselves and looking at themselves. They just avoid triggers, almost like an alcoholic. It's, okay, don't hang out with John because John likes to drink on the weekends. You may get triggered. Don't go to the bar because they serve alcohol in there. You may get triggered. Well, it's inevitable. You're going to eventually hang out with someone who drinks, or eventually you are going to be triggered in a way, right? But being, let's say, like spiritually fit or going through some kind of transformation and doing the inner core work enables you to not be triggered by those things because life goes on. Now, with that said, I'd love to go into, you're arrested, you ended up going away. What did the inner core rehabilitation process look like for you, and what did it do for you?
I think the rehabilitation process didn't happen, like it took years to figure out everything. Like when you just get put into prison, you're like, okay, this is a time to work on yourself. I did everything, like reading. I had my whole plan for when I got out down to the wire of what my LLCs would be called, to what I would do with the money from the club to go into real estate, and I had everything. I still have all the notes, they're in my office, just piles of notes, and I'd read all these books because I spent time in solitary, and I'd read books and I'd highlight, and I got quotes, and I started reading the Bible a little bit and started looking at religion, and just like I was so obsessed with, okay, I failed. This is my opening door to success. I was focused on my story. My story is going to get me a big payday, which I can use to pay everyone back and get a fresh start. Like that was like what everyone goes to prison feels like. And I compare it to like I interview a lot of people that just get out of prison, and I see people like Billy McFarland too, who had just gotten out of prison, years after me. And I see in him, even though I'm younger, I see in him a me just a few years ago, because that was my mindset. Posting on social media, talking about my success, saying how successful I am or what I'm going to do or this is my plan, and announcing my moves. And that was the mentality. And it took years and years after all of that to finally piece all of that together. So in prison, I was focusing on myself, like the losing weight and working out and getting physically fit. But I still had that same mentality that I did before when I got out of prison, wanting to get into the club or wanting to take on investors or just wanting to do everything. It took me having to realize that wasn't going to work out, and then working at a job for 4 years, dedicating my life and soul. Like prison didn't rehabilitate me at anything. If anything, it made me more thick-skinned and stronger and ready to go out whatever my next challenge would be. But I would say my biggest attribution to success would be those 4 years I worked at Whole Foods, where I was grinding. I started from the bottom. I rebuilt my life I've rebuilt my credit. I got a car, I got a dog, I got an apartment, I got a girlfriend, all from working at Whole Foods. Just starting at the bottom, making $15 an hour, not taking the easy way out, and working until I left there making $33 an hour. And I was going to make $100K, a little over that, as a felon who no one else would hire me. And that was just working crazy hours and overtime. And I learned so much from doing that and starting from the bottom and building, because in my past life, I owned a nightclub, but I couldn't pay my bills. I was behind on every bills. The bills kept piling up. My family I lived with my parents. I didn't have any credit. I had no car. My license was suspended. I had all of this shit piling up on me. So being able to rebuild from the very ground bottom on my own, that was the experience of a lifetime. Being able to do all of that and then being able to say, hey, this isn't for me. I'm 27, 26 years old, and, I don't have a family yet. So I still have this passion to be an entrepreneur and to be able to say to myself, I'm walking away from Whole Foods, which was the only thing I knew for the past 4 years, and I fell in love with it, and I was passionate about it. To be able to go to them and quit and just put in my 2 weeks and throw that all away with all my friends and family members and all these people looking at me weird and funny and strange, like, what did you just do? And I had just gotten off probation, and, they're looking at you weird, and the community's looking at you weird because you just did something that very few people have the balls to go out and do. For me to do that and walk away from that and bet on myself using my own money, my own credit, and tearing that all up just to take that risk, which is one of the scariest things you'll ever have to do in your life, to do that. And I did that, and I jumped into that fire, and then to be able to see it build and build this from the ground up, to be able to, just start making TikToks in my car, to then have a studio. That was that grind that all these successful people talk about that I realized I never had the first time when I went about things. And I had gotten that investment and seed money when I was a young kid without putting in that hard work that I thought I had put in at the time. So now when this all starts to piece together, I'm prepared mentally to experience it. And I know not to get cocky and to stay humble and to keep your circle close. And, when you make some money, now you're like, okay, maybe I want to go do this or buy that. But then you realize the stuff, you did that when you were a kid. We were talking about out there earlier about women, like experiencing women that slide in your DMs or whatever. And I compare that to making money and trying new things and having like possessions and promoting things out, because a lot of these people are just looking at you for a certain thing, and they don't actually bring value to your life. So do these materialistic things actually provide you with value? And that's how I'm always thinking about things. I'm planning things out. I'm very cautious in my planning, and I keep my circle very small now. And I don't go out like to the clubs. I don't go party, and I like to be in bed, early. And I'm a homebody now, and I just like to keep to myself and do my thing. And I've completely changed my life through going through all that bad shit and just learning from trial and error. And now here I am, talking to you in a studio I never would have thought I'd ever have.
So I love how you talked about that job right after, getting out of prison, the $15 an hour at Whole Foods job. In sobriety, it is encouraged to get a sober job right when you first get sober, if you're not working. Mm-hmm. And just to help build the structure and implement some kind of routine on a daily basis and keep it simple. You mentioned, I think you said your credit was upside down. You had a million things going on. It was very overwhelming, right? And getting to the basics, sticking to the basics, helping yourself, create that awareness. You even learn about accountability in jobs like that. Simple jobs where you're just showing up every day, dressing up, showing up to Whole Foods, and just even maintaining those relationships with a boss who's your superior and reporting in and showing respect and accountability. It goes a long way, and it helps you kind of identify who you really are as a person, which I loved. And what else do you implement on a daily basis? And I'm asking you this because I've noticed you and I work together on a few different things, and there are things that you have been brutally honest with me about, and it has to do with money in a great way. You were so honest with me about, a certain matter with money. Sorry, I don't know how to say this on here. I don't want to make sure.
You can say whatever. I don't care.
No, you were very honest with me about a charge for something, and I was just so I was shocked by it. Be given, and no offense, not that. I guess I kind of was judging you a little bit based on going away, but it seems like you've really done the work and you've really gotten to the core. What are some tools that you implement today on a daily basis to ensure you're staying grateful and not letting your mind go back to, the facade and this is all the good that I'm doing and this is my next move?
Well, the biggest thing I've learned, and this applies to why I said what I said to you about money, is that I learned in the last year, through some of the people that I've been around, is that not everything's transactional. And when I was a kid and I was in the music business, everything's transactional. Like I was talking to someone recently where he's like, well, what if you have this person, he's a big exec in the music industry, and he's like, oh, we can get this person for your podcast. I'm like, great, let's set it up. And he's like, well, he's going to want like 40 or 50 grand to do it. And I'm like, listen, in the podcasting world, no one gets paid to come on to podcasts. It's all about relationships. I didn't pay Chevy Chase to come on my show. It was building a relationship that got there, and now the relationships, it expands. And so I learned through the power of my current business partner and the relationships he's had and who he's able to call just to get him to do a favor for him because he's done so many favors for them. I'm realizing the value in that, and that you don't charge people for everything. Because for so long, when I owned the club, everyone's charging me up the ass for everything. There was no freebies. There was no, hey, this first one's on me. Now when people come to the studio, I say, listen, I do a lot of free stuff for people. And I don't say that in like a complaining type of way. I try to help out where I can because I know I have my thing that works for me, which is locked in, which I love that it's social media sites paying me, it's advertisers who have money paying me, and it's not people that barely have money that need to pay me for a service. That's what I love about that, and I'm able to live off of that, and that's great. There's a lot of people that want to get into podcasting or whatnot that don't have the money, and there's this industry where everyone wants to charge crazy amounts. And I remember reflecting on young 18-year-old Ian that wanted to rent some production equipment for the nightclub, $10,000 this, credit this, artist deposit this. There was no freebies ever. I don't ever remember someone saying this one's on me, ever. I remember the one time the production guy help me out because I had bounced a check on him and he realized I was struggling but wanted to do the right thing. And he looked out for me. But there was always a charge, a percentage to book this person and this. And even when I was first starting, everything was transactional with my old partners. Everything was money related. And it wasn't until this last year meeting the people that I have in my life now where I realized life's too short and it doesn't make sense to make everything transactional. And yeah, I could bang you on a price for a couple months paying, triple what it's worth or whatever. But then when you realize that A, it's not worth it, or B, you don't want to continue doing it because it's draining of time, energy, and money to do the thing that you are kind of passionate about because it costs too much, then I lose you as a client long term. So is that, a couple grand worth it, the 2 months where I can make maybe 50 on a 10-year relationship because everyone's both winning? So it's just about making mutually beneficial relationships. And I apply that method to everything I do in my life now too. And I'm very cool, calm, and collected about thinking like if someone does something, maybe they're having a bad day, maybe this, maybe that, don't make this move. Like I just think about stuff and I spend the time thinking about it. And my mentality is so much more different than it ever was. And I feel very strong in that. And I feel like when you put good energy like that into the world, it's going to come back to you. Great karma will come back to you. People want to be around you and you're not taking advantage of people. I never want to be in a position where I feel like I'm taking advantage because I know subconsciously that goes back to the whole fraud aspect thing. Like I don't want people to think I'm doing any type of shady business too. So I'm always calculating. And the way I look at my business now too, I'm not looking to make money on the studio. I just want to pay the bills because I have my podcast and that makes money. So if I'm always looking at clients like, okay, if this person charges this amount and I keep that across the board and everyone's happy with that price, great, that covers the bills. Cool, we can keep operating. And I look at it that way as a pie, and not a lot of people look at it as the pie. They're looking as that one payday right off the bat.
On this podcast, I talk a lot with my guests about self-esteemable acts and giving away and giving back. Do you think with this journey, it sounds like you are partaking in a lot of self-esteemable acts, and it's a great way to live because a lot of people look for instant gratification when it's transactional. Is this the happiest you have ever been in your life?
Yeah, I always thought I was happy in moments, but it always related to a thing. But like now I would say like I have good friends around me. I have good family. This studio makes me so happy. Just like that little creative office, because that's what I had. Like life's come full circle. I had that when I had the club. I've always had like a very creative office space, but then I lost all of that and you got put in a jail cell and then you're working for somewhere else at Whole Foods sharing a communal office space. And even when I was sharing the studio with those guys out in Poughkeepsie that I was telling you about and doing these things, it was never really mine. So to be able to have this come full circle and know that I got here on my own from no one else, no one gave this to me. No one, gave me a following. Even when I did the HBO documentary, that didn't blow me up. No one knew what HBO Max was when that first came out. So for me to have all this on my own, that's what, makes me happy. And it's less about material things. All I care about, and Joe Rogan, says this best too. I heard him say on a podcast, like it's about just like having good people around you, being able to take yourself out, have a good meal. I love food, I'll do that. I don't need to do anything different. Like I thought I needed to go live in LA or live in Miami, no offense to Florida or anything, or do all these things, but I'm fine here paying a lower rent and I'll travel to those places. And I don't even really like traveling. Like I like staying here in my spot and working here. And, I'm building a good team. We have Matt now. And I just have some really good people in my life. And that's what matters. And I'm looking at it now of like, okay, if I die tomorrow, will I be okay with everything? And that's the way I got to look at it. And I'm just trying to always just do the right thing. I pay a good amount in restitution a month, and I have a restitution where that's obtainable in my lifetime to pay back. It's $200,000. You see some of these guys that were in my position know millions, millions and millions of dollars. And I interview a lot of these fraud guys, and they have no intentions of paying any of that back. So I'm just always just trying to do the right thing, pay my bills on time, and just keep moving forward. And that's what makes me happy.
That's amazing. Well said. If you could go back to 16, 17-year-old Ian and give him a piece of advice, what would it be?
I always say, I always think about what would have happened if I didn't lie that first time that concert failed. And I get ripped for this on the podcast because I tell guests, I'm like, you only made one bad mistake and that affected the rest of your life. And you see in the comments, no, that person made all these mistakes. But when you look back on it, it started with one. And this is what I mean by that. Like that one lie I told, I was successful in high school. I was very successful until I told that one lie in senior year that affected the concerts, and that set off everything. You had your own story where that one incident affected everything, and that incident could have been the first time you tried Vicodin or whatever at the high school, and that's what triggered later on. So we all have that one moment that defines us, and that moment defined me. So if I could go back in time and tell young me, I would be just to be honest in that moment, but also at the same time, knowing what I know now and learning what I've learned now, I don't know if I would want to take that back because it changed everything for forever. So I guess the only thing I would want to take back was just people losing money, which they'll eventually get back, and it's on track to do that. So if you could take that out of it, then that would be awesome. But otherwise, I've learned way more than any college degree would have gave me. I've learned about people, I've learned about relationships, and I have something so special that makes me unique. That had I never went to prison, I wouldn't have this podcast because it's in a world where everyone has podcasts and everyone has this. And this makes me stand out in my own right. And I have something so special and unique because of my past and what I've went through. And the biggest thing I've learned is it's not about me anymore. It's about the stories that I have on. It's about the people that come on that wouldn't normally get a voice. And I think that's where a lot of these people that were in my shoes go wrong coming out of prison, where they want to make it. Like, I get so many guests that come to me and they're like, I want a book deal. I want to, do you know any literary agents? Do you know any movie agents? Can you connect me to Chevy? Can you do all of this? And I get it because I was them. Like, I figured everyone needed to connect me to whoever. Like, old Ian would have asked you for 9 million favors, if I had first met you because you have connections. I would have asked you right off the bat. Now, I look at things so differently and everything's going to work out. Like, people say to me, oh, why don't you title this video differently? Why don't you do this differently? If it's meant to go viral, it's going to go viral. That's the way I apply life. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And everything else will fall into place.
Do you believe in God?
I would say I'm not necessarily religious, but I believe in a higher power and a higher universe. And I don't know if that's necessarily God related or whatever. I believe in just like everything happens for a reason. I read the Bible in prison, and I'm not like a super religious person. And we grew up half Jewish, half Catholic. And so I would say overall, yeah, about that there is a God and there is that higher power.
That's amazing. Well, Ian, I want to thank you for being on Rise Above. And I appreciate you coming all the way to Florida to be. Thank you for having me at your studio, Ian.
Wait, we're not in Florida?
No, man. Come on. The gig's up.
Kevin, thank you, man. I'm glad we got to do this. I'm glad it worked out. I didn't even realize when I asked you when you were coming to New York that you lived in Long Island before and in New York. But then when I saw my brother's notes that he sent me about you, that you grew up in Long Island or on, I don't know, I'll never get that right, in or on? On, okay. So it was cool that worked out, and I'll definitely come and check out your real studio.
Awesome.
Because you have something cool going on there, and you're getting some good guests, and it's only going to continue to go.
Thanks, man.